There is no shortage of evidence for evolution. In fact, since the time of Darwin, it has become even more compelling. Perhaps the first place to look is the fossil record. Fossils are traces of organisms that lived in the past. The many fossils that have been found and described in the scientific literature make up the fossil record. Many fossils provide evidence for extinct species, those that are no longer living. Darwin interpreted extinction as evidence that species are dynamic and that the array of species living on Earth has changed through time. Recent analysis of the fossil record suggests that over 99% of all species that have ever lived are now extinct. The data also indicate that extinctions have occurred continuously throughout Earth's history, not just in a few catastrophic events. Fact of the matter is, the fate of all species is to go extinct. So, how do we know the age of fossils and rocks? Radiometric dating. This process utilizes radioactive isotopes to compare the concentrations of radioactive material against stable chemical material within a fossil or rock. Atoms, like cells, decay over time. Atomic decay occurs by loss of nuclear mass. The amount of time it takes an atom to lose half of its nuclear mass is called a half life. These half lives can be used to determine the age of fossils, although the best it can do is by age ranges only. How do we know these age ranges? We extrapolate based on radioactive decay observed today. Since decay is constant, we can calculate the length of time it takes for an isotope to lose its mass. To put it simply, parent elements are radioactive atoms while daughter elements are stable atoms. Parent elements eventually become daughter elements. Therefore, the more parent elements, the more recent the fossil, and the more daughter elements you have, the more ancient the fossil is. So we can expect that trilobites, being much older than humans and dinosaurs, will contain more daughter elements than parent elements. Also, all trilobites that have ever been found, and there have been lots of them, even I own one, have been dated to exist between 500 and 245 million years ago. A T Rex lived around the end of the reign of dinosaurs, and so all T Rexes that have ever been dated are aged between 66 and 67 million years ago. Note that the closer it gets to modern times, the more accurate the range of time gets. T Rex did not live alongside Stegosaurus or Brachiosaurus as Jurassic Park would have you believe. They are separated by millions of years. Finally, human fossils of our own species go back as far as 200,000 years. Because they are more recent, we would expect more parent elements to daughter elements. Keep in mind that not one isotope works in all cases. Carbon 14 is good for more recent fossils like mammoths and ancient humans, but dinosaurs and other more ancient creatures are often measured with uranium 235. Ever notice that many vertebrate forearms contain the same types of bones but are modified to fit the niches of each organism? These are called homologous structures. They're homologous because these limbs indicate a common ancestor. All four of these organisms have a humerus, which is the upper arm bone. They have a radius and an ulnus, which are the lower arm bones. They have carpals, which would be the wrist, and then of course the finger bones, metacarpals and phalanges. The only difference is they're slightly modified based on the particular environment in which they live. Sometimes species have features that have no apparent function or appear residual. These vestigial structures, while non functional in modern organisms, were once used in a past common ancestor. Snakes, like whales, have remnants of a pelvic girdle where their legs once existed. That's because snakes share ancestry with monitored lizards like the Komodo dragon. Flightless birds, the human tailbone, even the muscle behind human ears, well, except mine, all of these are examples of vestigial structures. Be careful, as homology does not always indicate a shared ancestry. For example, many Arctic species have white fur or plumage to help them blend into the snow. This is because the result of environmental selection pressures and not because they share direct ancestry. Homology also exists at the embryonic level and is strong evidence for shared ancestry in vertebrate animals. All vertebrate embryos have gill pouches and tails at some point. Fish retain gills for respiration. Amphibians can retain throughout life or lose them as adults. Reptiles, birds, and mammal gills become the auditory tubules which connect the throat to the inner ear to help equalize pressure between the inner and outer ear. Biogeography is the study of the distribution of organisms around the world. We now know that at one point in Earth's history, a supercontinent called Pangaea once existed. This allowed for the free movement of organisms, but eventually the continents broke away from each other. Now take a look at Africa and South America. You ever notice that the western coast of Africa and the eastern coast of South America fit like puzzle pieces? We now know that a plate line in the middle of the Atlantic, which caused the western and eastern continents to separate from each other. What's even more interesting is that the fossils of the same species of organism are found in both South America and Africa today, indicating that they were once connected. Finally, look at Australia. It has remained the most isolated of all continents. And because of that isolation, even though there are mammals complete with hair and mammary glands, not one native Australian mammal contains a placenta to nourish a baby in the mother's uterus. All Australian mammals are either marsupials or egg laying mammals. And this pattern exists because the separation of Australia from the other continents prevented that gene from entering, the placenta gene, from entering the Australian ecosystem. What is even more bizarre is that even though many Australian mammals appear similar to mammals elsewhere in the world, they are far related from those other mammals. But because of environmental selection pressures, current Earth ecosystems worldwide require the same animal types that burrow, glide, climb trees, and eat and kill other organisms. Well, except the kangaroo, we can admit that is strictly an Australian thing. It kind of goes to show that nature requires certain types of organisms and only certain body plans work for specific environments, regardless of relatedness between species. Finally, all life shares the same genetic code no matter what. So, for example, the code CCC is going to be proline, no matter what organism you are. In fact, the more related two species are to each other, the more similarities in DNA we see between them. Cytochrome C is an important electron transporter in the electron transport chain and has been well studied in eukaryotic life forms. Since cytochrome C is a protein, and proteins are made of amino acids, we can study the nucleotide sequence that forms cytochrome C. And based on the organisms provided, it's no surprise that pigs and humans have fewer nucleotide differences in the DNA for cytochrome C, yet there's a greater difference between humans and yeast. Nevertheless, the fact that we all use cytochrome C for cellular respiration is evidence of common ancestry, even if the protein structure varies between species. It's no surprise that many Americans and people worldwide have difficulty understanding evolution, so let's go over some common misconceptions. First, many people will dismiss evolution with the phrase, "It's just a theory." This phrase is such a mischaracterization because the definition of theory in science and everyday language differs drastically. A scientific theory is a body of principles that explain a particular phenomenon, not a guess or a hunch as it is used in daily language. In fact, much of our understanding of science is written as theory, as most of them aren't questioned by the general public because it's easily observable. Cell theory, germ theory, and atomic theory are easy to grasp because the evidence is found in real time since we are outside observers looking in. Evolution, Big Bang, and plate tectonics spans eons of time due to the slow and gradual changes. It's difficult for people to grasp this more abstract scientific theory because we have no way to observe this in real time since we are living within these concepts. Nevertheless, all of these are just as fact based as gravity, and no sane person wants to test that over a cliff. Another misconception is the mechanism of adaptations, that individuals are exposed to changes in their environment and therefore make the necessary genetic changes to adapt to their environment. For example, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I become one with the fish, I will never turn into a fish as I lack the genetic predisposition for fish adaptations. People confuse the words acclimation and adaptation. So, in a cold environment, I acclimate by drinking warm beverages and putting on a sweater, but the adaptation of shivering raises my body temperature when needed. While a person can acclimate to living in cold conditions, humans lack the adaptations to do so with our lack of body hair and increased surface area for heat loss and high metabolism to feed our energy hungry brains. In fact, individuals can't evolve. That's because once we are conceived as zygotes, our somatic cells only undergo asexual mitosis. This means the DNA in our cells, barring any mutations, remains the same from the time we are conceived until the time we die. However, populations can evolve because the mechanisms of meiosis cause genetic recombination of DNA and two parents, which cause the next generation to be slightly different than the previous one. Evolution is the result of natural selection, not some end goal or to make better traits in organisms. Simply put, those with the best traits for a given opportunity at that given time will produce more offspring than those without. Evolution isn't perfect, it makes trade offs for changes in organisms. Humans are the only truly bipedal primate. Doing so has freed our hands to be able to perform multiple tasks while moving around. However, this comes at a cost as our backs take a toll due to our spines being more vertical and affected by gravity. In all primates, their spine is supported by two sets of legs with less stress from gravity. Many animals have beautiful displays to attract mates, but it comes at a cost of being spotted and eaten by predators. However, because this helps them acquire a mate, these traits remain in male turkeys. When I see drawings like this, I find them misleading as it doesn't display the story of a multitude of generations between each organism in the drawing. Without a lack of understanding, it appears as if an ape came down from a tree and lost its body hair and started walking, all in the span of a lifetime. Plus, why do the dudes always have to look like Chuck Norris? And same with this one, but I'm pretty sure the goals of life haven't really changed. So, mutations, which introduce new alleles, can be the result of a random mutation or environmental trigger. However, mutations simply propose alleles. So, evolution is not random, mutations are. But the thing is, a mutation only works if it makes an organism more suitable for an environment. So, an albino squirrel, for example, it's not going to do well in this environment. You see, natural selection is quite predictable for given environments. In our next video, we're going to look at how new species form.